laugh at us because they said it is not going to be sunshine and rainbows forever, and it's going to change, and it's going to require a lot of work and a lot of hard work, and I'm weirdly okay with that. But what I think is cool about that is that kind of sounds like a lot of the work I do in social media, in digital marketing, and I think our relationship to digital marketing and digital channels is kind of like a weird marriage. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is our weird marriage and our relationship to social media and digital marketing. Especially because the CGLCC, they call me up and say, Tim, we want you to talk about social media. And I go, great, I can do that. And they go, but we want to know if you think it's actually still effective, which is an ironic question to ask a social media marketing consultant. But I'm gonna actually try and genuinely argue for both sides, because I believe in happy, healthy, intentional marriages. And that's what we're gonna really talk about, is our marriage to social media and digital marketing. I think everything we have to do in social media, everything required of digital marketing platforms and social media and a marriage all require the same things. So I'm going to give you some of those pointers. I think the first thing that's required for a happy, healthy marriage with digital marketing is a level of intentionality, choosing to be there. Marriage doesn't exist in isolation, right? It's usually two or more people who want to be together. And I see that in social media and digital marketing as well, right? We have consumers, and as consumers, we talk. And in marketing, I'm constantly fascinated by generational psychology. What do we know about Gen Z and millennials and Gen X and boomers, which is such a millennial thing to say? Consumers have each other. Consumers talk to each other. And so do businesses, and so do social media platforms. And I think that's important, to have those conversations and to remember that everyone on every other side of the equation and the relationship is also talking to each other. So, we talk about how popular and how huge Facebook is, right? And people say, oh, we love Facebook and we gotta be on Facebook because every business is on Facebook. Well, do we have to, though? Or could we do it better? Are we on Facebook by default? Interestingly, HubSpot in 2021 found that there were over 220 million small businesses, and businesses actually, using Facebook. But Facebook admits that only 3 million of them pay for advertising. That's a tiny, tiny amount. And interestingly, we talk about Facebook all the time, but growing a Facebook page is one of the hardest online platforms to grow. It's I call it inbound. It's like a website. You have to hope people kind of find it. You hope they kind of go down that rabbit hole, and eventually they take the action that you choose. That's a very passive way of looking at it. And I think if we have a level of intentionality with it, that's when something magical can happen. Not just being on Facebook for the sake of being on Facebook, but being on there intentionally and with a choice. Just likewise, a common thing that I hear in my practice is people say, Tim, I'm sick of Instagram. I hate it. I'm going to go to Pinterest. Cool, but if your target audience isn't on Pinterest, isn't buying things off Pinterest, and fun fact, people make more purchases off Pinterest than any other social media platform. People take their calls to action and they purchase more often from Pinterest. That has to be an intentional choice, though. And that's what I want you to think about, is that level of intentionality. Are you actively choosing, and choosing regularly, what you do and how you do it? I think the second thing that's important for a happy, healthy marriage with social media, with digital marketing, is involving the right people. So when I got married, my partner and I decided we were going to be the only ones who decided how the wedding got planned. But suddenly, we were thinking about, well, parents have to sit in the front, and then these parents have to sit at this table with these people, but these other parents have to sit at this table. And we're like, hold on. Who are the right people to involve in this conversation? So sometimes clients say, we're going to jump ship from Instagram, we're going to go to Pinterest because we think the millennials are there. We think the Gen Z is there. And I usually ask them, Have you even asked someone if they're on Pinterest? Have you even checked that they are, that this is something that they want to use? You have to make sure you involve the right stakeholders. My favorite example that's kind of top of mind right now, people love to hold Facebook, Twitter's coming into the realm about accountability, how they use data. And people love to point the fingers at CEOs. Elon Musk now, which is a weird thing to say, Mark Zuckerberg for Facebook. But I don't know if CEOs are always the right stakeholders. If Mark Zuckerberg had a change of heart today about how our data was used and wanted to change that, his board of directors could fire him and replace him by tomorrow, which tells us that we don't have the right stakeholders in that conversation. So make sure, and just like with consumers, when we're advertising, when we're trying to use it, ask, are the people that we want to appeal to here? I have one client, and I work in higher education, and we're thinking about the social media strategy for the 2022 fall semester, and they asked, what's the banner going to be on our Facebook group? And I said, abandon the Facebook group. They are not going to be on Facebook. We have to rethink this whole thing. We have to involve the right stakeholders. This is probably my favorite point that like. If you have to leave in the next 60 seconds, here's what I want you to hear. Seek feedback. Often when we talk about social media, all we talk about is posting, posting, posting. What are we going to post? What are we going to say? What if we tried listening? Recently, Jim, my partner, and I recently had a disagreement. We had one of our first disagreements in our marriage. It was great. And it's because we didn't seek feedback from each other. And we both signed up to do something one night, and we were like, and I said, hey, I need you to come with me to this event. And he goes, no, I have an event, you have to come with me. Because we didn't seek feedback. This is also one of the easiest things you can do in your social media, in your digital marketing, is seeking feedback. Instagram stories, use those engagement stickers, your polls, your questions. I love the little rating scale. And something else I like to do is post those and interact with the people who interact with your polls. They are more likely to engage with you, to engage with your brand. Beyond that, though, ask them questions, ask them feedback. Something I've done in my practice, I encourage my clients to do, is feedback campaigns. So anywhere from 1 to no more than 2 times a year, we poll and survey our social media followers. And we ask, why do you follow us? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? Or what are we not quite getting right? But it's so important to remember that it's not just about posting, 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 and what you put out into the universe. You have to listen as well. I want to encourage you to try different things and to try new things. If your marriage with your partner, your spouse, social media involves waking up every day, going to work, having the same bland spaghetti dinner, paying taxes, and dying, that's going to be boring. Try something new. We see social media platforms trying new things all the time and failing and sometimes succeeding, but we're going to talk about that in a minute too. So, Instagram. Out of Instagram, we got stories. Where did stories come from? They came from Snapchat. For Instagram, that was a huge success. Instagram stories are all the rage. Fun fact, consumers view Instagram stories more than they view the news feed. So whenever people say like, ooh, should I post in the news feed or should I focus on stories? Focus on stories. People view those way more. But then Twitter and LinkedIn tried stories as well. And show of hands, did anybody see LinkedIn or Twitter stories? A little bit, yeah. And then you probably haven't seen them because they died. They didn't work. And that's okay to try those new things, to see what works, to see what doesn't. Likewise, and sometimes it will be a big game changer. In 2016, Facebook introduced Facebook Live video streaming. They saw the success from Periscope, which came from Twitter. Live video from Facebook changed how we do content in social media marketing. But let's talk about when things go right and when things go very, very wrong. I think an important part in social media, digital marketing, marriage is to know your success markers. How do you know what you're doing is working? One, measure it. I tell this to everybody. I will die on this hill. If you don't measure it, it's not marketing. If you don't measure it, you're not doing it in business. It's not real. Know your success markers. Nothing breaks my heart more than when I work with clients and I say, hey, what do you want this to look like? What are you hoping to achieve? And they don't really know. How can we chase something if we don't know what we're chasing? Is what I want to ask. Your success markers can be totally unique to you. And everyone has different success markers, right? BuzzFeed is just looking for eyeballs. Twitter is focused on revenue. YouTube wants watch time. It's okay to have your own success markers. If that's revenue generated from social media, if that's engagement rate. I don't usually encourage education as a goal in digital marketing, especially as someone who teaches in higher ed. How do you measure a change in understanding? So I try to avoid that one. If anybody's thinking about that, let me know. We can talk about that and unpack that. It can be opportunities discovered or the size of your network. But have some success markers. Know what your success would look like. Likewise, I think it's important to know when it's time to quit. I know the day that I think of where I'm going to hide Jim's body is when I know I need to leave my marriage. That's a joke. I wouldn't think about it. I would just do it. Know when to quit. I think it's so important. And we don't talk about failure enough in business. I love talking about failure and how things fail and failing forward. But know when to fail, right? LinkedIn and Twitter had very clear benchmarks for what they were looking for from stories and what they hoped for from stories. They were looking for a certain number of users, they were looking for engagement rate, and they were looking for eyeballs, the number of impressions. They didn't achieve any of that and scrapped it. And that's okay. Just like with your success markers, you can have different markers for when it's time to quit, when it's time to move on. Just be intentional. See what I did there? Be intentional with whatever you move on to. When you call it quits, when you back out of that. And it can be anything. So an interesting question I'm fascinated by is Elon Musk becoming CEO of Twitter enough for you to leave Twitter? A lot of celebrities have said yes. I have very mixed feelings. I'm personally sitting on the fence, but think about those things. Your markers for success or for failure or when to quit can be anything that's important to you. My last couple, explore your possibilities. Be open to different possibilities. One thing our married friends who've been married a long time like to remind us is how our relationships are going to change. And I'm excited for that, because I also think about the very, very, very brief history of social media marketing. It's maybe 15 years old now, really, when you look at it. And things have changed. And that's okay. And cool things happen when we're open to change and what things can look like. LinkedIn started as only like a job search platform. List a job, find a job. Now it's the world's largest professional networking site. In the few people that I've talked to at this summit, most people, when I ask them about social media, which do you use? I'm hearing a lot of LinkedIn. And that's because it's changed. And there's cool possibilities there that we can explore. When I was learning about digital marketing campaigns and strategies, here's something no one told me that I wish they had, because this is the magical part, I think, of digital marketing, is what it reveals about ourselves and our businesses. When I work with businesses and we talk about, say, brand messaging and say, hey, what kind of message are we going to put out? We tend to find our boundaries and say, no, that message isn't quite right. Oh, yeah, that's something we had never considered. And we discover parts of our business. And that's something I love about digital marketing, is those boundaries that show us who we are and who our businesses are. So I want you to be open to that. The other place that I really see possibilities expanding is when we play with ads. So a very common ask I get in my practice, people say, Tim, I want to run ads. I need leads. I need sales today. Cool. And we do. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, because it's a bit of an art and a bit of a science. But there's always an element of surprise, because clients go, oh, I didn't realize I could use this to get followers. Oh, look, we went to get sales, but we also got email subscribers, who becomes more of a loyal audience later on. Or, oh, with ads, when we launched this content, we discovered this content was amazing and landed really well. We didn't think it would, but it did. And sometimes we also put money behind content and it totally flops. And we think that was the greatest post we ever designed. There's a lot of possibilities there. And just being open to those possibilities, I think, leads to a happier, healthier marriage with social media and digital marketing. The final thing I think that leads to a happy, healthy marriage to social media and digital marketing is being open to give and take. So let me just complain about this real quick in my marriage. Here's something no one prepared me for. Marriage is just 365 days of figuring out what you're going to have for dinner. Trust me, I have to figure out what's for dinner tonight. And when I thought about that, I'm like, that's not something I signed up for. But it's a required part of it. And digital marketing is kind of the same, right? In our businesses, sometimes we're like, oh, I didn't sign up for 365 days of figuring out what to post and who to engage with and what to do. And that's when I think, okay, what can I give and what can I take in this? Sometimes giving and taking is about what's life-giving. What's life-giving for you to give and what's life-giving to take. One example I think of I see this time and time again in organizations when they say, we're going to give the social media to the millennial or to the Gen Z. They're young, they can give us results. But that's not life-giving and that's not interesting to them. And they don't want to give or take in that relationship, right? So being open to that. Maybe you're a really good storyteller. Focus on telling stories. And actually, for any organization or business looking to figure out, like, who should we give the social media to? Don't give it to a young person, unless they're a really good storyteller. Give it to a good storyteller. You can learn social media. You can learn Instagram in 30 minutes. It'll be fine. Telling an interesting story, that's where there's magic. Find the person who's willing to give stories and share stories. Because they'll be able to take something life-giving out of it. Likewise, when it comes to all digital marketing, when folks say this is a bit of a struggle, we don't know who wants to do it, who likes it, say find who may think it's life-giving, who it is enjoyable, and find just one thing about it that's enjoyable. Build on that, and then build on that. And it gets easier, and it gets more enjoyable, and then it just becomes part of a regular system, if you will. So, for anybody here who's thinking about divorcing social media, I see you. That's fair. If you want to get married to social media, my partner works for the government. I got the paperwork for you. Don't worry. I'm on top of my paperwork game. Some of you may want to keep your marriage to social media, and some of you may want to divorce social media, and I'm here for both sides of that. I want to encourage you in your marriage to social media, to digital marketing, to any partners or spouses, to be intentional. Choose what you do in your social media intentionally. Choose the results that you're after, and that will work in your favor. Make sure you involve the right people, internally and externally, right? Are we reaching our target demographic? Are we speaking to them? Are they speaking to us? Are we listening? Favorite part of feedback and seeking feedback. And that is a part of the digital marketing portfolio. Ask questions. Be open to that. Variety. Change it up. Play with your options. One of my favorite things I love doing with companies is auditing their social media and saying, let's figure out what content's working. And they say, we think it's this. And then we pull up the data and go, and they go, oh, that's interesting. Turns out our cute puppies are doing well. Your cute puppies are always going to do well, by the way. There's a hierarchy of there's top types of content that people love seeing because marketing is nothing more than applied psychology. So if you can, smiling faces, babies, animals, baby animals. Smiling baby animals? Smiling people holding smiling baby animals? So that variety, play with the variety of options available to you. Especially right now, we're across the board. It's almost dizzying trying to keep up with these days. Every social media platform has major changes coming out. It's amazing. If you're curious about any platforms and what changes are coming out, let me know, ask, and we can talk about it for sure. Know your success markers. How do you know your social media is working for you? It can be anything, any metric. Just please, for the love of all that is good and holy, measure it. Measure it, measure it, measure it. Likewise, know when it's time to quit. When it's time to quit on the platform or the strategy, and when to move on to something else. Be open to those possibilities. That's the beautiful thing about social media is it's just a reflection of humans, and humans are capable of really magical and wonderful and strange things. So be open to what your followers and your community can share with you. And then finally, play with that give and take. What can you give? What can you take from your experience and from everything you do with social media? Friends, I want to thank you so much. I've talked a lot. Now I just want to open it for Q&A because I know social media is usually a very hot topic. I am most active on Instagram and YouTube, though, so I would love to connect with you there, keep the conversation going. Otherwise, I've plowed through this very quickly. So, yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna ask if anybody has questions. It's gonna look a little funny. I'm just gonna repeat back your questions so that people at home can also hear. Yeah.
This is more like a free consultation.
Yeah, that's okay.
So, because we are doing mental health at work, I thought that having the voice of a company was very self-serving.
Mhm.
So I've been thinking about just doing a personal Twitter, Instagram account where I can express my thoughts and that will link back to the company because that's what I do. I don't know if that strategy it's too detached from the company,
Mhm.
not connected.
That's a really good question. So the question is about should a messaging, especially around like mental health and just anything about your business, should it come from the business, from the corporate, or from something personal? Golden rule, one of the very few rules in social media marketing, make it personal. Personalize it. If you can personalize the person behind it, if you can really attach a name and a face. Remember, marketing is nothing more than creating an end vision where the business and the consumer both belong together. That is one of the fastest and easiest and most beautiful ways, I think, of creating that end vision. There's nothing more magical than a CEO of a company who loves to write and is willing to put their face on the social media. So, yeah, great question. Thank you. Yeah. Questions?
Yeah, I've got two questions. One, so for intention, I'm assuming that just means kind of purpose and plan.
Yes, intentionality refers to having a purpose, having a plan. I'm very open to what plan means, what that includes, what that looks like, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. And second question, what would you say for concerns about people who and companies that do social media posts but are concerned that it's getting buried in the algorithm in the news feeds?
Ooh. Do we have another 4 hours? The question is, what do we do when we're from a company and we're worried our content is getting buried in the algorithm? Number one, deliver better content. And that's easy to say. Let me specify. So many, and I work with a lot of clients who say this, who say, Tim, we're worried about beating the algorithm. Beating the algorithm is the wrong focus. Deliver excellence. Deliver excellent content that people want and that people love, that they welcome, that they look for. Gone are the days when we can passively just put content into people's feeds that they just accept. Now people, and we know consumers are getting smarter. They're trying to get away from advertising, and they perceive anything that comes from a company as advertising. So now it's about, I think, delivering content that they love, that they welcome, that's personal, that's interesting. There are a million different ways to do it. But I would say focus on delivering excellent content. And my favorite way of doing that, every month, no more than every 3 months, no longer than every 3 months, review your content. Review what the top performing posts and content was. Recreate that or learn from that is my go-to strategy. I hope that helps. That's a really good question. Thank you. Other questions? Yeah.
I have two. One, can I quote you on Marriage in 365 Days of Finding Figuring Out What to Have for Dinner?
Please do.
Okay, because I run a food company. Brilliant.
Yes.
Like you put that, you'd be like, yeah.
Yes.
For dinner.
I am so sick of always having to figure out what's for dinner.
Got you. No vegan has your back. Okay, and then my real question is, do you recommend like having an in-house person or an agency, or like, what are your thoughts around that? 'Cause like, I mean, I do a lot of storytelling myself, but I also run the business, so I can't do it all.
Yeah.
But I'm like debating bringing someone in-house or having.
Okay, I'm going to keep this as short, sweet, succinct as possible. Question is, should you have your social media in-house? Should it be outsourced? The end vision that I have that I think is most sustainable and beneficial to businesses when it's at scale, all of your organic content and your content creation should all be done in-house. Anything super specialized, so usually ads, anything beyond like a boost or a single ad. So if you're doing campaigns, retargeting, custom audiences, Google ads, YouTube ads, that should usually go outsourced because that's where you can find the experts. They're in the digital marketing space. A lot of us don't like to work in-house because we want freedom. So for the specialized skills, you kind of have to outsource for that. That said, very common strategy, and I actually work with clients on this, start usually by outsourcing. It's usually cheaper at the beginning. Figure out what you like, what's working well, what's not working well. Once you've learned from that, then move to an in-house employee. In-house employees can make very expensive mistakes if it's your first time hiring. So that's why I usually like to make those mistakes outsourced and then bring them in-house. Great question. Thank you. I'm going to say maybe 2 more questions, and then the other presenters are looking to take over the room. Any other questions? Beautiful. Well, we'll get out of here early. Friends, thank you so much for joining me and chatting me about social media this morning. Feel free to email me or connect with me on social media, and I'd love to keep the conversation going. Thanks, friends.